The quiet neighborhood of Enfield, Connecticut, sits just 20 minutes north of Hartford, pressed close against the Massachusetts border. It is a modest town, the kind where families keep to themselves and mornings begin with the hum of routine. Inside one home on that street, a mother woke up expecting to hear the familiar sounds of her daughter moving around, perhaps humming to herself, or padding down the hallway to find the cats she so dearly loved. Eve Rogers was 12 years old. She was on the autism spectrum and was homeschooled, spending most of her days within the familiar walls of the family home. Her mother knew her rhythms intimately, the way she woke early, the way she was a light sleeper, the way she was almost never in bed past 10 in the morning. But on March 18th, 10 o'clock came and passed. Then it crept closer to 10:30. No footsteps, no sounds. The silence that morning was not peaceful. It was wrong.
Her mother's worry grew with every quiet minute. She walked to Eve's bedroom door and found it locked. She did not panic immediately, but the stillness on the other side made her stomach drop. She found a butter knife and worked the lock open the way mothers do when fear overtakes hesitation. What she found on the other side would shatter her completely. Eve was lying face down on the floor. She was not breathing. Emergency dispatchers received the call just before 10:30 in the morning. A 12-year-old female, unresponsive. First responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. Eve Rogers was gone, and no one yet understood what had truly happened inside that room.
When police arrived at the Enfield home that morning, they were stepping into what initially appeared to be an unexplained and tragic death. A young girl, 12 years old, found by her mother on the bedroom floor. The circumstances were unclear. The cause was unknown. That would soon change. Officers observed Eve lying face down, a blanket wrapped around her waist. When they carefully removed it, they discovered she was unclothed from the waist down. A dispatcher's radio traffic noted that the girl had been found face down with what appeared to be blood coming from her mouth. But it was the broader picture of the room that began raising serious questions. On the floor near Eve's body, investigators found two pills. One was red or pink in color. The other was clear with a white powder visible inside. On her desk, there was a white pill that appeared to be aspirin. The presence of these pills would become a significant thread in the investigation.
What concerned the officers most, however, were what they described as potential signs of sexual assault. This was not a conclusion drawn lightly. It was based on physical observations made at the scene by trained first responders who had seen enough to know when something was deeply wrong. The decision was made to perform a sexual assault examination. The results, when they came back, were chilling. The kit revealed a mixture of DNA from at least 3 contributors. At least one of those contributors was male. 3 contributors: a 12-year-old girl, a locked bedroom door, 2 unidentified pills on the floor. The investigation was no longer simply about explaining an unexpected death. It had become something far darker, a search for who had been in that room with Eve Rogers and what had been done to her. Among the family members present when police arrived that morning was Anthony Federline, Eve's stepfather. He was 39 years old and had been living in the Enfield home alongside Eve, her biological mother, and the other children in the household. From the beginning, investigators noted that Federline's behavior stood out. In the chaotic grief of a scene like that, detectives are trained to observe without judgment. People react to trauma in wildly different ways. Some collapse, some grow cold, some rage. No single reaction is automatically suspicious. But Federline's behavior continued in ways that drew attention. According to the arrest warrant, he was described as overcome with emotion and appeared angry. He refused to speak with police, telling them he needed space because he wanted to break things. In a household where a 12-year-old girl lay dead on the floor, her stepfather was asking law enforcement to give him room
because he couldn't control his anger. Then came the DNA sample. Investigators asked Federline for a buccal swab, a standard procedure in a case where sexual assault was suspected. He consented, but made clear his feelings about it. He described the request as putting salt in the wound. Detectives filed all of this away. Emotional reactions don't make someone guilty, but they noticed that Eve's biological mother cooperated fully and openly with law enforcement. She answered questions. She explained her daughter's routines, her disability, her sleeping habits. She helped paint a picture of who Eve was. The stepfather did not want to talk. As the first responders and detectives worked through that terrible morning, Federline remained a figure at the edges, present, emotional, resistant, and unwilling to sit down with the people trying to figure out why his stepdaughter was dead.
The weeks following Eve's death were defined by waiting. The sexual assault kit had been submitted. Samples had been collected. Now it was a matter of science catching up to suspicion. Direct DNA comparison, where investigators have a known sample to match against evidence, does not always take as long as people assume. Rather than submitting an unknown profile to a national database and hoping for a hit, detectives were working with samples taken directly from people connected to the case. Under those conditions, results can return in as little as 36 hours. In this case, the results came back on April 2nd. Anthony Federline was a match. His DNA was identified as one of the contributors found in Eve's sexual assault kit. The evidence that police had been carefully gathering since March 18th had now pointed directly at the man who had been living in the same home as Eve, who had been present the morning her body was discovered, who had described giving a DNA sample as salt in the wound. Late on the night of April 2nd, members of the Enfield Police Department arrested Anthony Federline under the authority of a Connecticut state arrest warrant. He was charged with sexual assault in the first degree and risk of injury to a minor. His bond was set at $1 million. At a press conference, Enfield police confirmed that the charges flowed from the investigation into the death of the 12-year-old girl found at the home in March. Federline was transported to a holding facility and was scheduled to appear before a judge in Hartford on Monday morning. 2 weeks after Eve Rogers was found on her bedroom floor, the man who had shared her home was in handcuffs. As the arrest made headlines, journalists and investigators began pulling at another thread, the public-facing life that Anthony Federline had been quietly building online, in plain sight for anyone to find. He ran a YouTube channel. It was built around themes of spiritual healing, energy work, and personal transformation. In his videos, he would address his viewers warmly, welcoming them to what he called his grounded fire soul family. He hosted long live streams, 30 minutes, sometimes over an hour, speaking in measured tones about inner peace, healing, and divine connection. The channel was tied to a broader business. Federline sold monthly memberships for as much as $33.33 a month. The website promised that members would soar on wings of transformation and divine connection. He offered online tarot readings, astrology-based guidance sessions, shadow work consultations, chakra check-ins, and energy healing services, marketed to people seeking clarity, self-standing, and something deeper than surface-level answers. He also held a day job. For the past 6 months, Federline had been employed as a school bus driver, working for a third-party company contracted with the public school system. The company stated that he had been properly vetted and that his background check had returned nothing of concern. Following his arrest, he was immediately terminated. Eve's mother, when approached for comment, said she had not been aware of any of the allegations and was still trying to process what was happening. She said she was allowing the legal process to unfold. Here was a man who had built a public identity around healing, around guiding strangers toward better versions of themselves.
And in a bedroom in his own home, according to investigators, he had done the unthinkable to a child.
As of the time of this reporting, Eve Rogers' cause of death had not been officially determined. Toxicology results were still pending, and law enforcement acknowledged that those results could significantly shape how the case developed going forward. The 2 unidentified pills found near her body remained a central question. Medical examiners were not looking simply for the presence of substances, they were looking for toxic quantities or dangerous combinations of drugs that could have caused her death through interaction. A toxic amount of almost any substance, including prescription medication, can be fatal. Whether Eve had been given something, had taken something herself, or had accessed pills belonging to someone else in the household remained unknown. There was also the matter of the other DNA contributors. The sexual assault kit had revealed at least 3 contributors. Federline had been identified as one. The other 2 had not been publicly identified, and police confirmed this was an ongoing investigation. Retired investigators familiar with cases like these noted plainly, more arrests were likely.
For detectives, the path forward involved both science and strategy. If Federline chose to cooperate, his knowledge of the other contributors could become a bargaining chip. If he lawyered up, which was his right, investigators would turn to his associates, his background, and any database matches they could find. Eve Rogers was described in her obituary as a girl who felt deeply, loved fiercely, and saw things in a way that made people stop and think. She cared about animals. She cared about justice. She stood up for what she believed in, even at 12 years old. She deserved better than what happened inside that house, and the full truth of what happened there was still being uncovered.